What is it, honey?
There's someone here.
So we watched a movie, and we were going.
To say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. We were going to watch for Halloween Sleepaway Camp, but
Yeah.
some things kind of got put on hold, and we're gonna get to that eventually down the line. But instead, we watched a movie called Funny Games. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to introduce my guests here. Don't call it a comeback. We have Tim Jarvis, who's returning.
Oh my gosh.
Don't call it luck. We have my wife, Madison Zeilinger. And just don't call. We have your host, Jordan. That's me.
Oh my gosh.
So those are your fun little tidbits there.
You're gonna be such a good dad.
I know. The hardest part for every episode is like actually trying to come up with the things
The
to say
jokes.
for the guests. Yeah, I'm running out of ideas, guys.
I came up with one. Sorry, go ahead.
So we watched Funny Games, which sounds like a fun little romp to watch.
It was neither of those.
Yeah, it was not funny and it was not a game at all. So for those of you that don't know what this movie is called Funny Games, it is a movie directed and written by a guy named Michael Haneke, which he really hasn't done anything that anyone in America would probably know unless you're really into the arts, like movie scene.
Sure.
Because he's an Austrian director and he mostly does his movies like that. But so what we watched was the movie that came out in 2007, which was a shot-for-shot remake of his original Austrian version of the movie that came out in 1997. So he wanted to release it in England, in United States, an English version. He wanted to release it, but he wanted people to recognize the characters. So the wife was played by Naomi Watts.
Right.
The husband was played by Tim Roth. Now, those are two really big names. Tim Roth, he was in Pulp Fiction, Planet of the Apes, Hulk. He was also in an incredibly underrated TV show called Lie to Me that I love. Naomi Watts, everyone knows her. The Ring, The Outsider, King Kong, 1,000 other movies that she was in.
She's good.
Yeah, great. And did you know, we were just mentioning this beforehand, Tim. You told me you started watching Twin Peaks, the old one.
Yes.
The new series, both Tim Roth and Naomi Watts are both in it.
Really?
Yeah, so that's a fun little
That's
tidbit
cool.
there that they were in that.
The connection.
Exactly. We also have two other characters, because it's a small cast in this movie. There's pretty
Yeah.
much 5 characters that take up
Main,
95% of the screen time.
Right.
The other two characters, Peter and Paul, which I don't know if he was going for the religious thing of like Peter and Paul, like the creators of Christianity, essentially like two of the biggest names in Christianity.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was going for that or not, but Peter was played by a guy named Brady Corbett.
His
or
name
Corbett.
would be Brady.
Brady,
Oh
yeah.
my
And he was
God.
in a bunch of episodes of 24 in season 5, which is like the only thing I knew him from.
Interesting.
And he was the creepier dude, the one who comes and drops the eggs and everything. That's the creepier kid.
yeah.
And then the other one, Paul, his name is Michael Pitt. He was on the Hannibal TV series a bit and a bunch of other
So they're
smaller
both
projects.
like in creepy.
Yeah, they both
roles
pretty much
always.
only play creepier roles.
They
yeah.
do it well.
Yeah, because they both have very weird, creepy faces. Like their eyes are kind of like baggy and sunken in. And
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, but their eyes are like that odd level of intense.
Yeah, it's
you
like
know?
piercing blue almost, where it's like it's too much.
Yeah, but not like a marine intense, like
No.
like an accountant intense. Where you're like,
Yes.
why would an accountant be intense?
Like
It's
this?
true.
American,
It's out of place.
It's like American Psycho, like
Yeah.
him like
Yeah.
staring at you before he's gonna axe you to death, like that kind of
Yeah, or
intense.
like,
Yeah.
murder somebody listening to like classical music.
Exactly.
That
Right.
type of thing.
Now, before we move on a little bit more, I just want to mention, if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out, Happy Halloween.
Ooh,
Have fun with
happy
that. But it's
Halloween.
also your last day to subscribe to our Patreon at any tier and get Cam to draw you a little spooky fun thing.
These are so fun.
Yeah,
They're
and
so worth
he
it.
just did one of a spooky corgi. It was a corgi in a ghost outfit.
It was
and
so funny.
It was so funny and so cool. So people, go spend like $1 on our Patreon and get a cool little art thing
Yeah.
from Cam. But you can only do it through October.
Right.
So it's gotta be
I think I
done.
might do that. Can I make him draw whatever I want?
Anything that's, pretty much anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cam, you know what I'm gonna have you draw.
Yeah. Okay. So Rotten Tomato scores. Let's talk about that real quick.
Sure.
Okay.
It got a 51% from critics, which I think it was like 100 and some critics, which is quite high
Yeah,
for
it's
Rotten
a
Tomatoes.
lot.
And then audience score was 54%. So this was middle
That's
of the
high,
road.
too.
Yeah. Like, this was very middle of the road. And I can't say this is a great movie, but it is an interesting movie.
It's
which
no
is
Forrest
why-
Gump.
Yeah, no. Which is why I like this movie so much, is just because of how unique it is and unorthodox compared to other movies.
Yeah.
So this movie grossed about $8 million and had a budget of $15 million. So it really didn't make its money back.
Interesting.
Now that was, I don't know now because those were stats like years ago.
Sure.
It's 2018. This came out in 2007. It could have made its money back by now. I can't imagine too many people are getting into this. It's not like Serenity and Firefly where like afterwards people are really getting into it after it's gone.
Right.
It's just little old me telling people about this movie.
Hey, you never know.
It is creepy.
Why are you telling people about this?
So let's do a little plot breakdown real quick here.
How can you even do a quick plot breakdown
So I'm
of
gonna
this
try.
movie? It's so intense.
When I was thinking
Yeah.
back on this movie, because I don't watch this movie very much, I watch it
Naturally.
maybe once every few years.
Yeah.
I always remember back in this movie, I go, oh, that's a pretty short movie, and it's pretty easy to describe because not that much happens. And then I started writing stuff down. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have the longest
that is a lot.
plot breakdown out of anything. So let's go through this real quick and chime in with anything.
How are you
going to
do a plot
want.
breakdown because you can't say the ending?
No, full spoilers. I will tell you now. Two warnings. One, if you have not seen this movie, go watch it first. Unless you really don't care about it getting spoiled. But this is a
Right.
great movie for twists. So go into it with that. Two, if you're gonna watch it, just be aware it's very, very,
Very unnerving.
intense, very unnerving, very demented, very hard to watch in some scenes.
Yeah.
So not like violent slasher Saw type hard to watch, like situational things that you would never hope on any of your worst enemies.
Can I also interject something? I
Interject.
just have a question about the Rotten Tomatoes score.
Yeah.
So that's like not that great of a score, right? We're saying it's like middle of the road.
It's not the worst,
No.
but it's
But
not.
I'm like, are people ranking it lower because they're like, oh, I didn't like that movie? Or like, I didn't like the way that movie made me feel? Because I'm like, there's movies like Mama that I hate because I get so scared by them. But I wouldn't go and rank it like
Yeah.
on Rotten Tomatoes because
That's
I'm
true.
scared by it. Like if people are ranking it low because
That's-
they didn't like the way it made them feel.
That's like people rating like an Amazon, like items, something they buy on Amazon a 1 star because the shipping took too long.
Yeah.
Right. Like
I
it's
was gonna
kind of
say-
irrelevant.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing, like a Yelp review. Most people are doing emotional responses, not necessarily
Right.
pragmatic responses. So
So-
assume...
Wait, emotional responses are taking priority. Welcome to
Yeah,
America.
exactly, right? So assume
But you know
that
what
most
I
people
mean?
that are ranking this low is because they didn't like how it made them feel, not necessarily
Right.
because...
'Cause then that's not really fair.
Because critics praise it as a very well-shot movie in the
Yes.
sense
It
that...
accomplishes what it set out to
Exactly.
accomplish.
You have these long static shots of not
Oh.
much going on that are mundane, but it just adds to that unnerving feeling of like,
Suspense.
what is going on?
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you.
Yeah.
Let's plot break it down,
Well,
and then
we
we'll
have a
dip
lot
into
to
it a little
say.
bit
Yeah.
more. So we open
Before
up
my
the
nose starts
opening.
bleeding.
Yeah, the opening is cool because it's reminiscent of The Shining. I thought that was always very
Yeah.
interesting.
Mhm.
How
Very
it's
much.
that crane shot over the
long road.
Yeah, the long road. They're
Yeah.
driving up
Kid in
everything.
the back.
Yeah, kid in the back. We meet the family. It's a husband and a wife and a kid who's probably about 10 years old. So it's
About.
George, Ann, and little Georgie. What is it with horror films and kids named Georgie? Like,
yeah,
what
I
is
know.
that? What's up with that?
Yeah.
It's
It's
they're-
like the little Timmy.
yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's just Georgie's a creepy name. Just throw it in there. So they're listening to classical music, playing a fun road game, and then all of a sudden the title screen hits, and we have like this crazy,
Yeah.
weird music that I can't even describe in a genre.
Right.
Which I can tell you the
It's-
name of it. Actually, I have it on
I
here.
would say
the song.
grunge thrash punk.
Yeah, grunge thrash punk with a little bit of death metal. It is called Bonehead by the band Naked City from the album Torture Garden. So if
Sounds
you
about right.
if you want to
Torture
hear a
Garden,
band that I cannot classify, go listen to that song. That's crazy. So they're going to their lake house for vacation. And when they pull up, they talk out to their neighbors. And something weird is going on with their neighbors. They notice two people there that they don't recognize. The neighbors are acting very awkward and distant.
Yeah.
So they say, hey, something's going on. That's really weird, but they don't think anything of it. Keep going. And they ask the neighbor, hey, can you come help us put out the boat in 20 minutes? Neighbor's like, cool, I'll be there. Guy comes over. We meet one of the people that we didn't recognize. Now, both the kids are wearing white polo shirt, white shorts, white shoes, white gloves.
Yeah.
They're very...
But they look like they're
preppy.
golfing.
Yeah, they look like preppy golfer. Like they look like they belong in a lake house
Yeah.
vacation area. So that's not weird. But we get introduced to Peter. Comes into the house, asks for some eggs. Very creepy, very weird dude. Like even before we know anything's going on, Tim, I think that you were like, this guy
I had
is
bad
creeping me
feelings.
out.
Yeah, I had
don't.
bad feelings.
He's very polite, but he's also very
There's something
awkward.
you can't explain about it.
Yeah.
I like it when people are polite, but when they're too polite, I'm just like, no.
Yeah, it's just weird.
Like,
So-
you're up to something. You're up.
It's
to
one
something.
of those weird things though, where it's like his mouth and his voice was very polite, but his face was very devoid
Yes.
of emotion. So
Yeah.
that's one of
Exactly.
those things where you're like, okay, like he's not like smiling and happy, like he's being very polite, but his face looks like menacing.
He was a
almost.
polite mannequin, pretty much.
Pretty
yeah,
much.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe
So
it.
he comes in, asks for some eggs. She says sure. He drops them. There's this really weird tension going on because he's like, well, I want more eggs now, even though I dropped them. And she's saying, we have guests possibly coming. We need to have our eggs. There's weird stuff. So he leaves finally with some eggs. And then he comes back with his friend or brother. I don't know if they ever said if they're
They don't
brothers or
ever
not.
say.
Yeah.
And his name is Paul. So now they're there. They're in the house. Paul is kind of the ringleader, I guess.
Yeah.
He's more of the captain, if you will. And he's saying, just give us the eggs and we'll leave. And
Right.
she's saying, I gave him eggs. He dropped them. Can you please just leave my house? You guys
Yeah.
are weird. The dad comes in and the son, and he's trying to mediate because he's stepping into the situation where, Madison, you said that's like the frustrating part is when you explain this interaction between them,
Right.
someone coming into that would be like, well, what's the problem? That doesn't
Right.
sound that weird. But when you're watching it, you're like, oh, this is so cringy
Yeah.
and weird,
Yeah.
and I don't like it one bit.
You know, it was funny when I saw that. I was just like, I think this, like, especially as a newly married person, I was like, moral of the story: if your wife tells you to throw people out,
Just
Just
throw
don't
them out.
throw them out.
Yeah.
Just throw them
Don't-
out. You can figure it out later. Just
Right.
throw them out.
And my
you know?
mind went there in a sense because she gets all like
Huffy.
huffy about it and goes, I asked you to do something, just do it. And she leaves. And so my mind is thinking, George, his mind is probably going, oh crap, she's going to be mad at me the rest of the day now.
Right.
What am I going to do? It's not going to. These kids are going to torture my family for the
Yeah.
next
Right.
12 hours.
Yeah.
And I think at that
So-
point, that's when he shifts and he asks them,
He asks them
okay,
to
like,
leave.
I can't mediate because I don't
Yeah.
know what's going on. Can you please leave? And he still has the eggs in his hand. And then that's
And then Peter
when-
comes up awkwardly and is like, give me the eggs. And he says no. And then they get snarky with each other. And
Yeah.
George slaps him because they insult him pretty
Right.
much.
Yeah.
And then that's when everything hits the fan.
Yeah.
They take a club out of the bag
Right.
and they hit his knee and break his knee. And that's when it all starts. And they allude later on in the movie, actually, because there's a lot of scenes where you're stuck on a shot and things are going on outside of the shot that you're
Yeah.
on, which is really weird. But you're hearing people talking, you're hearing things going on.
Yeah, whether it's audio or,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know.
You just hear the
where you can
dialogue, but
hear
you're not
what's
really
going
seeing
on.
what they're doing. And there's a sequence where Peter and Paul are talking, and they said, if you would have just given us the eggs, we would have left.
Which
and
is not true.
I think that
I
that's
don't
their
think
first
that's true.
test. I think that they put people in these situations, and if they react in a way where they're, because I think they put an emphasis on being polite, because even though they're deranged, I think that they are polite. And if people respond to their weird awkwardness and asking too much in polite manner and just give them everything, they go, all right, we're going to move on.
See, I completely
actually think
disagree.
that.
Yeah, I disagree too.
Because they say throughout the movie, we give you chances. You've had
No,
chances.
but that's the whole mind game.
That's
is
true,
it's
that you
the
don't really have a
illusion
chance.
That they had a chance.
because I feel like they you know, she had the opportunity to be polite, which was presented with the first set of 4 eggs.
Yeah.
He drops them, so he comes back. Can I get 4 more eggs? That's when it kind of becomes a problem. Even if she would have given him the second set of 4 eggs,
Which she
She
did.
did. It was the
That's
third
when the
set
dog.
Oh, yeah,
of 4
that's when
eggs
the
that
dog
she
got
would.
it.
right.
Yeah.
So and then they came back for more eggs. Even if she would, he would have been like, all right, you know what? Here are the eggs. Just please leave. They would have found a reason to break those.
Yeah,
or
and be like, we
A
don't have any
reason
more
to
eggs.
stay.
I
Yeah,
agree with you.
yeah.
I guess I didn't think of it that way,
Yeah.
that everything they're doing are mind games
That's
throughout
what I'm
this whole
saying.
movie.
It's
So them
not-
saying that is just
Yeah.
giving, because there's sprinkles of false hope throughout
yeah,
this whole
I
movie.
think that's
Right.
what it all is. Like, is this false hope of like, and that's, you know, we gave you chances. It's like, no, they're perceived chances,
Right.
but you never had control.
He's
Yeah.
like, you slapped me, so really, like, I had to do this to you.
Yeah.
And
It's your
it's like,
fault.
no, like,
Yeah, you slapped me because I was being an a-hole.
right.
So we had to destroy your knee.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
no.
Like, no, that's not a way to do
And
that.
I think it does talk of movies in America these days where they're saying, yes, we're giving you these opportunities, where when we watch these movies, these opportunities never really were there in that
Right.
sense as well.
Right.
You know, we get frustrated. Like, we even did in this movie. We're like, run, go do something, do
Yeah.
this and that. But really, when you're in a situation like that, there's no good answer
Well, it's a
because
learned helplessness.
learned helplessness, but also we're watching fiction, and this
Yeah.
models after reality. One critic said the greatest thing about this movie is it's unrealistically realistic
Right.
because it's still fiction, but it's also not the fiction that Hollywood has sold you.
Right.
It's the fiction of like an alternate universe, like this actually happening kind of thing, and how
Sure.
things would play out, which is kind of cool. So anyway, we got off on a tangent there.
Yeah.
They break the dad's knee. This is where they start playing really mind
It becomes
games.
very
It becomes
evident.
very evident that this is what they're here to do. And he pulls out a golf ball and goes, "Why do I have a golf ball in my pocket?" Kind of playing the first game, and they're saying, "Oh, you went out with the golf ball in the golf club to hit it, but I never hit it. The golf ball's here. Why didn't I hit it? Something stopped you. What stopped you? The dog."
Well, they don't say it.
They don't
It's
say it, but they
implied,
know
yeah.
it. That they remember because the dog was barking all the whole because the dog did not like these people.
Right.
And we heard kind of a idea that the dog maybe got injured because it's barking, and all of a sudden it has one of those like whimpering barks, and,
And
it
then it
stops. So they play a game of hot and cold, where Anne goes out and finds the dog dead in the back of the truck, which is a terrible scene.
Yeah.
The beginning, one of the first of many of terrible scenes that you
Yes.
have to sit through on this. What's weird is nothing is overly gratuitously violent on screen.
No, not at all.
Because they don't show you a lot of the violence happening.
Yeah.
It's
They
always
show
in
you
the
the
background.
aftermath, and you hear it while it's happening.
Yeah.
So it's almost worse because you're then having to visualize it in your brain.
It's
Right.
the Signs effect from the movie
Yeah.
Signs, where Signs was a scary movie, but you didn't see pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Like the whole movie, the whole movie was scary, but 95% of it, the first 95% of it, you never saw the aliens.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
There's nothing scarier that they can put on their screen than what you can make up in your imagination.
yes.
Which is great that they did it this way.
Yeah.
I think it
It's also,
also
great if you don't like a lot of like visual bloody
Yeah.
violence.
that you can handle the idea of things, but not the sight of it, of
Right.
course. And it speaks just even more because the reason that the director made this movie was to speak about American violence and our fascination with it in media and stuff like that. And when they asked him, well, you did really violent things, but you didn't put it on screen, he goes, that's because I don't want to be part of the problem. I didn't want to be lumped in with another Saw or another Hostel or
Right.
another Hills Have Eyes,
Yeah.
He goes, I want it to be there and say something about it, but I don't want it to be in your face. I want it to be on your mind rather than
Right.
in your eyes,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that's actually really cool.
Exactly.
Side note, the director is a total douchebag. I was reading
Yeah.
interviews, and he
Oh,
is the
really?
biggest jerk ever when they would ask him things. Like, he just seems very cocky, and he seems very condescending to humanity, pretty much.
Yeah.
He thinks that his philosophy is better than anyone else's, essentially what it
Oh,
comes
okay.
down to.
Don't
Yes.
we all?
So, yeah, right. So I didn't like that very much when I actually started reading interviews for this.
and if anybody disagrees with him, he thinks they're stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
one of
Like
those.
pretty
Sounds about
much,
right.
he said he pretty much said in an interview that if you make it to the end of this movie, you're a bad person. Is what he said. He said, I give you every chance to leave during this movie to realize this is bad violence.
Oh, because he gives us
Yeah,
the
exactly,
chance to
exactly.
leave.
So,
Oh,
and then
thank you.
the interviewer said, "Oh, my colleague, she left in tears at the end of this movie because she was so upset and she just wanted to leave." And he said, "But she didn't leave." And that speaks more about her than about me. And I'm like, "Oh, you're such a douche!" Like,
Probably
we're watching
a little
a movie.
defensive over
Be
his
like,
movie.
no, it's her job to sit through the movie.
Exactly.
And watch it.
Like, if
that's
you're
her job.
yeah, if you're
so,
a critic and all
like,
that. So they play the game. They find the dead dog. This is the first fourth wall break we find.
Mm-hmm.
Something they don't tell you is that they're breaking the fourth wall a bunch. Paul turns around and looks at the camera, shoots us a smile, goes back to what he's doing. That's the first moment we realize, oh crap, they know we're here watching. So the neighbors come over from across the bay to talk to Anne. So now we have another scene where it's really awkward. Paul's telling her, hey, can't say anything, which I have huge problem with. There were 3 people in that boat, and her, and just one guy with no club, no weapon. She should have just said, this guy's holding my family hostage, help me, and pin him down, and then the other people could have helped pin him down.
No, it's
and
learned helplessness already. She's already learned that she doesn't have control over the situation.
Yeah, and
Oh, it's just so
I mean,
frustrating.
I agree with you of like pushing him in the water, jumping in the boat, and be like, go.
Yeah.
like we got to get the police over to my house. But her child is still held
True.
hostage.
And her
And her
husband.
And her husband.
With the other guy.
And they,
With the other guy.
all they know to this point is that they hit him with a club. They don't, and killed
don't
their
know
dog.
everything that's
They
coming
don't know
next. Yeah.
how far they're willing to take
they
it.
haven't made the official bet yet.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm sure in her head she's going, maybe they'll just leave.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is where we come in and we have the official bet. Well, they do. Here's our first sprinkling of hopelessness and like false hope. They said, why don't you have a landline? Mm-hmm. Like, if you would have had a landline, because earlier they said, hey, we're not going to stop you after they hit the guy's leg. If you want to call someone, the police, a friend,
Yeah.
anyone, give them a call. But they had knocked the cell phone into the water when they were trying to get the eggs,
Yeah.
and they didn't have a landline. So this is the
Right.
first one where they're joking with them, saying, if you only had a landline,
These people are such
you
a-holes.
could have called someone. But then they make the official bet. They bet that by 12 hours from that moment, which is 9 o'clock the next morning,
Yep.
because it's like
8:40.
8:30 or 8:40 at night, that all three of them will be dead.
Yep.
And they say, you bet us that you won't be dead.
Right.
And this is where they say, now we have to give you guys opportunities to be able to get out, because it's not a bet if there's not something at stake.
They don't officially say that until
later, but yeah.
that's what's implied. Yes.
So they break the fourth wall again for the second time when he's saying, who he turns to the camera and says, who are you betting on?
right.
And
He's like, they're the heroes, right?
yeah, and then they're the heroes. Who are you betting on? Do you think they'll make it? But then Peter brings up a good point. He says, well, they lose either way. If we kill them and we win the bet, they're not here to fulfill the bet.
Right.
But if we lose the bet, we
They're
lose.
not living
They're not
anyway.
living. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's no way for anyone for them,
Right.
the two bad guys, the
And this is
antagonists,
also
to win.
the scene, which I don't know if you're going to say this next, where the dad is like, why are you doing this? And then
Yes, I
he's
am
like,
getting
oh,
that.
okay, go ahead. 'Cause that's
Uh,
one of my favorite parts.
Let's see here. He says, hang on, you jumped ahead a little bit, because
Oh,
I think
sorry.
there's a little bit more.
Don't worry, I do that all the time with this
Yeah.
podcast. Every single time I'm on it, I'm like, blah,
Yeah.
point.
You're
And
like, but the
he's
end.
Like, that was literally for 30 minutes.
Here we
in the
go. No,
future.
you're right. You were right. It is
No,
at this
I
part.
know
I
it's in the
jumped
same
I
part.
jumped ahead. So they said,
Yeah.
why are you doing this? And then they start telling fake stories. So he says, oh, Peter, his mom got divorced, and then he's screwing his mom, and like all this weird incestuous white trash type stuff. And then he goes, we're just messing with you. We're making stories up. And he goes, do you want to hear another version? He's a spoiled little brat who's jaded by an emptiness of existence. And
Right.
they're literally just saying, who cares what our reason is? We're
Right.
doing it to you. It's kind of like the Joker idea. Like, where
Yeah.
did the Joker come from? Well, who cares? He's just this crazy person.
Yeah, I think that draws on, when we're watching or, experiencing a story, we want to know why it's happening.
Yes,
Regardless of what it is, if it's a rom-com, if it's a sci-fi, if it's this type of movie, we want to know why the story is moving forward.
Right.
Why these things are happening, what the cause and effect are. But like there is no cause in this.
It's
so
like
there
one of
shouldn't be an
those 'cause
effect.
you
Yeah,
were
and I feel like
home.
it's ingenious because
I was actually when I saw it, I was gonna bring it up. I was like, from The Strangers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, why are you
But even then, they give you a reason. Why are you doing this? Because you were home. That's a reason. They
No.
were just going around to whoever.
But
They don't
it's-
give a real reason. They're just there.
No,
Yeah.
but it's
This is the moment.
implied
It's similar,
that it's
though.
because
It's similar,
you were here.
but they never say it, which I think is ingenious because you're sitting here and this is a moment where you think we're going to get exposition that explains plot to this story, and then you don't. And then you have to go, no cathartic feeling. Like it's no,
Yeah.
like I feel like it was ingenious to not really give you anything
Well,
there.
the scariest part is not having a motive because
Exactly,
that's what makes you feel safe. If somebody's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, you did this," then you're like, "Oh, well, I've never done that as a person,
and
so I'm safe."
they mess around with that and try and say, oh, if you were just polite and all this. But again, like
Right.
we learn,
It's not
that's
real.
just them messing with them.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they play a game now called Cat in the Bag, which is probably, I think, the hardest scene to watch in the whole movie.
It's pretty
where they put a sheet, a
Pillowcase.
pillowcase over the boy's head and say the two antagonists have a bet that Anne doesn't have any fat rolls pretty much because she's in such good shape. So to prove it, they say, take off your clothes. And I know why you don't want to, because your son's here and that's indecent. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this pillowcase over
Right.
his head so he can't see. And then you can fix this bet for us.
right,
But when she doesn't comply, they pull it tight and start suffocating him.
right.
And then not only do they make her get undressed, but they make the dad,
Tell her.
George, say, hey, tell your wife, get undressed, honey. So now they're just messing with them beyond
Right.
belief. They don't end up killing the kid. She does take off her dress and
Right.
everything, and it's a very
And also, I
intense
want to like
scene.
insert because one of my like big hard no-nos for like horror movies is I won't watch anything with rape scenes. And I'm like, so when I asked
yeah.
George,
I said they
I was
don't-
like, I don't want to see anything that. So he always knows if he's going to show
Yeah.
me something, don't have
Yeah,
it in it.
that's-
But I'm like, it wasn't like anything sexual.
No.
It was like,
Yeah,
this is the
and-
bet. Take off
and
your
even after
clothes.
she takes it
And then
off
he's like,
and
"Put it
she's
back
like
on."
shaking and so like just disgusted, he goes, no jelly rolls. See, I win. Thank you. And now you can get dressed. Like it
It's
wasn't
not
a
a
gross,
sexual
weird,
thing. Weird.
sexual
Yeah.
thing.
Like honestly, I felt like when they didn't, and this sounds weird, but like with the scenario that was happening, it's like when they didn't like sexually assault her, I was
Right.
kind of like, shouldn't they be sexually
'cause
assaulting her at this point?
Right.
Like, you
no,
know,
that's
like because
not their motive, which is so weird.
No, I know, and that's why it was weird. It's like you've harassed this family, you've injured them, you've committed violence against them, and now you're having the lady take her clothes off,
Right.
and then you're having them put them back on.
Yeah.
like 30 seconds later, it just doesn't make sense, and I think that's what makes.
Well, I think
them
because what he
scary.
did is he went down the line of Psycho, where it's like, oh, we get it. They're upset. They're like sexually like suppressed and stuff
Right.
like that. And then
Yeah.
it's like, oh no, we were wrong. You expect it, like you said.
Yeah,
and then it's,
they're just, like,
you think you're
asexual
getting
or
another
something.
answer to like what's driving them,
Right.
and then you don't.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
because
was-
it was you totally expect some sort of sexual harassment to
Right.
occur, but
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't, and you're like, and it just trips your mind because the storyline plays
It's
right into
pushing
that.
it.
Oh yeah,
you know.
it's great. It's a great way to make you feel unnerved the whole time. Well, Georgie
Yeah.
ends up running away and trying to
Oh
go next
God!
door,
Don't even get
which
me
I think was your
started
most
on this.
frustrating
I was
moment.
so mad.
So Georgie runs over to the next door neighbors and finds that they're all dead. The neighbors that we met earlier.
this kid, man.
Yeah.
Like
He did not do a good job. I mean, I will give him this. He realized he was leaving a trail of water footprints.
Right.
And then he took
Yes.
his pants off and his shoes. But
Yeah.
then
And he
instead
had
of
the gusto to make the run in the first
yes,
place.
True.
Yes, I'll give him
True,
that.
he did make that run.
and he was a 10-year-old
Right.
in this.
But the problem was he couldn't
situation.
jump over the fence.
Yeah, which is like
Which was like a low fence.
What lanky 10-year-old who like cannot climb a fence?
Seriously.
like, I
Yeah.
have no
That
idea.
was bad.
Like my brother was not the most athletic kid.
Yeah.
When we were growing up, I was a little bit more athletic than him. If my brother had to get over a fence, he'd get over
make
that
it.
Especially
fence.
with like a life or death
Yeah,
situation.
like-
I was not an athletic kid by any means when I was a kid. I used to jump over the fence at school all the time to get into the wash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it was
I
no
remember that.
problem.
Yeah.
It was easy. So, yeah, that was kind of a bummer. And then he takes his shoes off, but he doesn't have the foresight to backtrack and use it as a false
Right.
trail.
Well, my thing is like oh yeah, but
Have you never seen The Shining? Come on, Danny Torrance did this.
Yes.
oh my
I
god. See, my thing is like he knows the other guy. Was it Paul? I think it was Paul.
Paul's the
Yeah.
leader guy. Yeah.
Paul's in the house with
Yes,
him.
he does
right?
know because he saw Paul chasing after
Yes.
him.
Why aren't you slipping out a window and leaving? You
Yeah.
And
know?
also,
Like,
Paul is
come
being
on.
very much like Georgie. Like he's saying
He's-
his
he's-
name,
yeah, he's
so he
being
knows
loud.
It's
where
Marco
he's
Polo.
at.
He's playing Marco Polo with him
Yeah.
pretty much, which is funny because I thought that was one of the creepiest scenes is when Georgie's trying to get in the house and we see Paul and he just does this slow little jog run across the field
Yeah.
to him. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that is terrifying.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
If you knew that guy who would do these things is coming after you, that is terrifying.
Yeah, it's this kid, man.
So we find out that the family next door is dead. George back in the house, we cut back over. He says, why don't you just kill us? And Peter says, don't forget the importance of entertainment, alluding yet again that they know an audience is watching. And one of the
Right.
main reasons they're doing this is because people want to watch them do
Right.
this.
Yeah.
So again, the director is telling us, hey, you're the bad people here. If you just would
Sure.
stop. It's like Schrodinger's cat. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
if you weren't here watching it, it wouldn't,
wouldn't
be
be
happening,
happening.
kind
Yeah.
of thing. So there's that. We have a moment where Anne begs them just to let them go. It's kind of the idea of sympathizing or getting sympathy from your captors,
Right.
Yeah.
which doesn't really work. After a whole scene where Georgie finds a gun and then tries to pull the trigger and finds out it's not loaded because he's probably never held a gun in his life.
I knew it.
Yeah. Paul catches him and brings him back. So now the whole family's back. Everyone's back in the house. They decide now it's time to shoot one of them. And this is an interesting scene because this is probably the second hardest scene to watch because they're playing Eeny, Miny, Mo about who's going to get shot first. They bring the
Right.
gun back. They have some bullets or some shells to put in it. They put NASCAR on. And the reason the next 10 to 15 minutes while all of this is going down, you're hearing the announcers on NASCAR playing in the background, which is adds to the unnerving sound
Yeah.
because the reason they put that in is NASCAR is like an American thing. And so it's just, again, alluding to America and its violence that this is all going on and they have NASCAR in the background and everything. And if
Right.
you notice, everything they were flipping through before they got to NASCAR was like our news channels and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
very
yeah.
American stuff. So they play a game.
It's a credit card company. I did,
Yeah.
right. I just
Mhm.
saw
Yeah,
that.
so that was
Discover
kind
card
of
or
that was kind
whatever.
of sprinkled in there for that. They play Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. They decide that Peter's going to kill Georgie. Peter and Paul.
Wait, I think you're skipping a part because
Hang
what
on.
happens is that are you talking about the sandwich scene?
So I didn't get to that yet. They decide that. Oh, so
They don't actually
They don't
decide.
Peter's still counting. You're right. And
While
Paul
he
goes, "I'm
goes-
hungry. You decide who to kill. I'm gonna go." Camera follows Paul into the kitchen
To make the sandwich.
while we still hear Peter counting which one he's going to pick. He's making a sandwich. He's like, hey, do you want anything? And while he's like talking like nothing's going
Yeah.
on, we hear a gunshot.
Right.
And then we hear people
Scuffle,
screaming
yeah.
and sadness and just gut-wrenching things. We hear a scuffle go on
While he's just calmly
while he's
putting
just
mayo
making a
on
sandwich.
bread. Yeah.
And then we come in and we see Georgie's body on the floor in a pool of blood with his top
They don't
of his...
actually really
We
show
don't
his
see his
face
head
or
or anything
anything,
because
yeah.
it's behind the TV set, but we just see blood all
Yeah,
over the
everywhere.
wall, on the
Yeah.
TV, everywhere. We see
terrible.
George Sr. on the ground, and we see Anne just sitting there back to Georgie boy,
Just crying.
crying. And well, actually, what we see first is when we come back, we don't even see that. All we
the
see is the
NASCAR
TV
TV.
screen with the blood on it, and we
Yeah.
hear Peter
Yeah.
and Paul arguing, and Paul's saying, "You're dumb. You were supposed to do the one after the guy you fell on. Like you did the game wrong." And then he goes, "Oh, and you made a mess in here. We got to go. Like this isn't how it was supposed to happen. We got to go." And he's like, "We'll leave the club in the bag, right? Okay, bye." And like they leave, and then they're not there anymore. And that's when we cut in and we see George on the floor, Georgie boy dead in the corner, and
Right.
Anne sitting there. And that scene, I feel like the first time I watched it, I didn't know who died, honestly, because you could tell that George Jr. was dead because there's a pool of blood. Where he was laying, the blood was on the wall.
Right.
But you didn't know if George Sr. was dead because you heard a scuffle, and then he's just on the floor.
Yeah.
And he's not making any movements, and she's just sitting there in the middle between both of them crying. Then we have the longest scene ever of her trying
It's
to...
so long.
She legitimately, while tied up, makes her way to the TV to turn it off. Because at that point, she just needs it quiet. Like...
yeah.
Yeah.
And then she gets herself up. She goes into the kitchen to get a knife. We see George Sr. start stirring. So we go, okay, he's still alive. She gets herself out of the stuff. Her and George now need to come up with a plan because they know that they're probably coming back. And I think this like frustrated you, Tim, also.
my God,
because
I
they
was
took
so
forever.
mad.
Like she was like, first let me help you get up and move here, which didn't need to happen.
No.
Like you
broken
said,
knee.
this is what happens.
No,
He's a broken knee. You give him a knife.
Look, you got one good leg. You
Yeah.
you can get up on your own.
Yeah.
Like, you got
Or-
one good leg, two good hands. Get up on
let
your own.
him just sit there, hand him the knife to
Yeah.
protect himself, and you go get help. So
Yeah.
the cell phone is now turning on, but it can't get through. So he says, you need to just run. You need to go somewhere. So after what's like 15 minutes of them just trying to figure out what the heck to do, which it probably was 15 minutes of them
It was
trying to
so
do.
bad.
It was so long. That's one of the bad things about this movie is they really do let scenes drag on, but it's again adds to the unnerving feelings. You're like,
Yeah.
just go already. Just
Yeah.
get there. So she ends up putting on some clothes and shoes and runs out. And George stays back to try and use the blow dryer to air off the battery to
And
be
eat a
able to
baguette.
use.
and eat a baguette.
Yeah, and eat a baguette. He takes a bite out of the baguette and then spits it out and throws it away. I'm like,
but with how long that was taking, it was like, oh,
my gosh.
fuck.
That's like a really hard scene to watch because it's just you're so frustrated. You're like, just get going already.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah, it was so frustrating. Oh my god.
So she finally goes out to get help. She's running to another neighbor. No one's answering. She's running down the street. There's some lights. She hides the first time because she thinks, what if they're coming back? Smart. But then she realizes the first car wasn't them. So she goes, okay, I need to just flag down the next car. Well, we cut away before she can flag down the next car. We cut back, and George went back into the family room to cover up Georgie's
Right.
body. And he turns around, and we hear a dunk, 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 and a ball rolling. And I think this is the best
the
creepy
best
scene
scene
ever.
ever.
The
Great
ball
scene.
just rolls into the
golf
door.
ball.
Yeah, the golf ball just rolls into the door frame. And then we're just sitting there watching it for probably a good 45 seconds.
Yeah, 'cause
And
you're
then
like, oh, no.
you're like, oh no. And
They're
then
back.
Paul walks up and he's like, he says something and he
Yeah.
picks the ball up and tries to throw it at George because they're just messing around now.
Right.
And then they walk in and they have Anne tied up. So
Right.
they were the ones in that car. They caught Anne. So now we're back. Them two are alive. They're both back. They're giving them a chance, they say, because otherwise it wouldn't be a bet. This is the time where they say,
Yeah.
we got to give you a chance because otherwise it was a bet. That's why we left the phone with some charge. That's why we gave you guys an opportunity to run out and go get some help.
Right.
You failed. That was your chance. Again, false hope because they weren't ever going to let any of this actually happen. They were keeping good tabs. We also learned very soon after this that they're actually playing God in this movie, and then they start messing with the idea of reality. Because at this point, when you watch a movie, you forget sometimes it's fiction, and you start getting emotional feeling. It's like this is actually happening. And that happens in this movie. Well, we get to this next part where they play another game, The Loving Wife. So they go, George Sr. here is the next one to die. Mm-hmm. You get to choose whether it's by the knife, and it's painful and long and excruciating, or with the gun, where it's quick and mostly painless. And so they play this game. They make her say a prayer, and then they say you have to say it backwards without any mistakes. Well, she grabs the gun and shoots Peter and blows his guts out pretty much.
Yeah.
And Paul is like, no, that's not how this is supposed to happen. And he starts throwing things around and goes, where's that remote? Where's that remote? He finds a remote, hits the rewind button. We rewind back to before that happens. This is the moment we realize.
It rewinds the movie.
The movie. So you're watching it in reverse to about a minute back. And that's the moment we realize, okay, this isn't
They have complete control.
They have complete control because, again, the whole point is to sprinkle you with false hope because now it's false hope for the audience. Hey, plot line, they might get out of it. We always think, especially Naomi Watts, she's in a bunch of horror films where she's the last one who makes it out. Kind of everyone else dies. Like The Ring, her and her kid are the only ones that make it out of that movie alive, right? So it's this idea, you're like, yeah, Naomi, go kick some butt, kill him, boom. And then it's like, no, that's not how this is happening.
Right. Yeah.
This isn't it. That's not how it's happening. So we're like, crap. So they break that fourth wall again, and he says, you want them to keep going, right? A good ending with plausible plot development. Like he specifically addresses it. Like, this is what you wanted as an audience, right? You wanted something to further the story along a little bit that's not so demented, but we're not giving that to you. So they shoot George in the head.
Right.
Again, you don't see it.
No.
It's off camera. And then they take Anne bound and gagged out onto the boat. Right. And they take the boat out into the middle of the lake. And they have a very interesting conversation here because the conversation is about universes, like fictional universes and gravitational pulls and how one universe is real and one universe is fiction. And Paul says something very interesting because he says fiction is real because if you see it in a movie addressing us, you're watching this movie, doesn't that make it real? Because you're watching it, which makes it reality. It's something, even though we are in a fictional universe, you are in the real universe watching our fictional universe, which makes this fictional universe reality. Yeah. So they're really pushing that home. It's very heady in that moment. And what's even weirder about this is they just casually pretty much kill Anne in this scene. Like, while they're talking about this craziness, he goes, what time is it? A little after 8. Oh, okay. Push her off the bow. Falls in, drowns to death. Like, you don't even see it. Literally just push her off and then you keep going with them. Right. Like it's nothing. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like,
just like, oh my God.
I think one of my other like parts that make them so creepy is in that scene. Because she's like over there and she's like trying to like cut herself free. And they're like, oh, this is like the Olympics over here with your spirit. Like, you're really trying. And then she's just sitting there. He's like, okay, like she's lonely. She's a widow now. Like, bring her over here. Yeah. Almost like the play of what somebody would think empathy is like. You know what I mean? Like,
they have faux empathy through this whole thing. Yeah. It's crazy. And then, so they kill her. Again, you mentioned one thing I glossed over, our one last little sprinkle of false hope. At the beginning of the movie, we see a knife that was left in the boat, and they actually focus on that. And so we think, oh, she's going to cut herself out and kill them. Yeah. Our one last little bit of hope that gets dashed.
Yeah, which I thought that was frustrating, and I actually just learned the term Chekhov's gun. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't.
It's in literature. Okay, so basically, it's a dramatic principle that states every element in a story must be necessary, and irrelevant elements should be removed. And the example is remove everything that has no relevance to the story. If you say in the first chapter that there is a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter, it absolutely must go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there. And so, like, it was funny because I just learned that term.
Yeah.
And then I saw the knife, when it gets pushed by the rope right in the beginning into the bottom of the bow of the boat.
Yeah.
And you're like,
and you think that's going to come back.
And then they're going out into the water. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to be able to do something about this. And then it's like, oh my God, no.
Yeah. And how casual it was, too, that while she's cutting it, he just goes, look at her. Like you said, look at her over here. That's spirit. Look at that. She's still trying to go. She's
but I
done
feel like
for it.
They
She's still
like
trying to do it.
that she did it because it's still feeding into the game. No matter what they did is feeding into the game. As long as she doesn't, if she just kept not responding, it wouldn't be fun for them.
Yeah. And so finally, oh my God.
Yeah, the ending scene.
So, and what's funny is the ending scene made me believe that the two characters, Peter and Paul, were completely metaphorical.
Oh, totally.
And symbolic.
I think so.
Wait, why? I'm missing this.
Okay, because so the final scene, if you were gonna talk about it, but they push her over and he's like, oh, well, we had some time, but I'm hungry.
Yeah.
It's just
And they
super
laugh about it.
casual.
Yeah,
they
it's
laugh
like,
about
oh
it, and
my
then they
God.
go to the next house down the way and go ask for eggs, which is basically how
they
this all
start
started.
everything. Yeah.
Now, so you first experience Peter and Paul when the main family drives past and asks
Right.
about golf. So now you have to kind of assume that if they're doing 12-hour bets, right? So with the first family, they're near the end of the 12 hours with that
Sure.
family, right? Okay, roughly.
Because the daughter had
Is
died
already
because we found that out later, and
Yeah.
he asked where she is, and she's not out there and everything.
Yes. So you imagine they're roughly near the end of their 12 hours. So, say it's about 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So then they go about the whole 12 hours. So now we're at to pushing Naomi Watts into the water.
Right.
So that's 22 hours. Now they're totally good to go to start
All over
asking for
again.
eggs, starting all over again. So
Yeah.
you're looking at another 12 hours, which puts you at 34 hours.
Yeah.
So it's like they don't get tired. Like,
Right, I see what
they're
you're
not
saying.
like real people. You
Yeah.
know, and there's no reference to like say they're doing cocaine and like something like crazy to keep them
Yeah.
going.
Well,
and so that's why I was like, they're not people.
What's interesting to me though too is you say like one thing I thought is it's very uniform. The first family they terrorized was a husband, a wife, and a daughter. Second family, a husband, a wife, and a son. But the next one they're going to is a husband, a wife, a sister,
sister-in-law.
a son, and a son's fiance. Because they
Right.
say when they come
They
over,
say
oh, my
there's-
son's
that's right,
here
yeah.
with her girlfriend or with his girlfriend or whatever, and
Yeah,
you'll really like
yeah.
him. So they're going now to a family of 6. I'm like, how's that going to work? Because you've always had it where the numbers aren't really much higher than what you're doing.
Yeah. So it's manageable.
So I'm almost like they threw that scene in just to be creepy with like, hey, they're moving on to the next one. They're pretty much just going family to family.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, logistically, I don't think you guys could actually do this one. This one
Oh,
would
I
take a
think
lot
they
more
can.
planning.
Yeah.
But it would take a lot more
the
planning.
issue is not the numbers, it's the mentality.
It's-
Like I
it's the
said, it's the fact
surprise.
that they think that they can't do anything, no matter how many numbers they have.
Yeah.
They're under the impression
Well,
that no
it's-
matter what they do, they're
and,
going to lose.
and it's in a community like that, the politeness,
Yeah.
where they're gonna allow them liberties into their home.
right.
Yeah, I'm gonna say,
You know.
Which is, to your point, Tim, if Giselle was home alone and some weird looking dude was in the house and she was like, can you ask me to leave? You would, without a doubt, be like, dude, get the heck out of this
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
But if he was like a nice looking dude or like maybe somebody like Jordan, you'd be like, what's the
What's the
issue?
problem?
Like,
a young, respectable looking person.
I would probably still be like, okay, no,
Of
leave,
course.
or like or if we're gonna continue this conversation, we're gonna step outside.
I meant,
so
like,
that you're
with
out of
the
house.
image.
But yes,
Yeah.
as far as image, yes, I would kind of like if it was like a homeless guy looking thing, I'd be like, all right,
Right.
get the hell out.
right.
But if it was
immediately.
or
Yeah.
some spooky looking dude, but if it was some really nice like comb over
Yeah.
Mormon, I'd be like, okay, well, let's not be mean to him. you
Yeah.
know?
Right,
Like-
which
Yeah.
was the
like-
reaction the dad had.
Exactly,
at
and
the
I think
beginning.
that's
He was
part of the
kinda like-
point is your perception.
Yeah.
Yes.
You think of these things as dangers. What happens when the things you don't think of as a danger actually are a danger?
Yes.
And I was thinking like there's probably the neighborhood politics at play where everybody's
Yeah.
kind of
Well, also, too-
these rich people helping each other out in other things.
They had
so
already
don't wanna rub
established
somebody the
too.
wrong way.
Exactly, they already established that Paul was the other family's partner's son.
Right,
So
right.
they thought they were like had a relationship.
Yes, yes.
And
Exactly.
then they were introduced, I forget as what, to the other family.
The niece.
Yeah,
and
like
then
a
the
nephew or something like
Yeah.
that. So they're being established as respectable people as well, not only looking normal. So
Which also makes you think, like when he first met them on the boat, he went out with her. And when you first watch it, you're like, oh, he went out with her to greet the neighbors because he wants to make sure she doesn't say anything. But then when you see the end, you're like,
He's
no,
scouting.
they're
He was
setting up the
scouting,
next
yeah.
because he
one.
asked, he's like,
Yeah.
which house do you live at? What's your dock? You
Yeah.
know, like, ugh, so weird. So anyway, that's the end of the movie. Moves on to the next one. We hear Bonehead again. Like
Yeah.
a weird song.
Yeah.
They play that 3 times in the movie. It's great. Now, let me say,
Cheap licensing.
yeah, really? It's
Yeah,
probably
right.
no one's ever heard of this band.
I hated it.
So this movie was not meant to be a horror film, but as I stated, a message about violence in media. We kind of already said all this stuff already, where it lends to that unnerving feeling similar to The Strangers, about how like, what's the motive?
Right.
We want to know answers, and we don't really get that. So the movie, I'm going to read here a little thing that I wrote down just when I was thinking about it and kind of doing some
Sure.
research. So the movie shows mastery over cinematography, but it wasn't well received because it was too unrelenting and no real resolution. Unlike things like Hostel or Saw that added story elements to the torture porn aspect, the audience is subjected to needless violence without any real justification. Haneke, who's the director, also tries to make as much violence off screen as possible to stop it from adding to the problem directly. I can see why many people wouldn't like this movie, but the fact that it has no motive or real story threads just adds that much more to the creepy factor of it all. It's a psychological roller coaster more than an outright horror film. So he did what he set out to do. He made a very well-made movie that made you feel gross afterwards. And that's not what we're used to. We're used to some resolution. We're used to at least someone making it out alive, or at least to getting an answer or two. And you don't really get that in this movie.
And what I think also added to the feeling that you had, like, as a viewer of, like, feeling icky or whatever, you know, or guilty, was that I feel like the fourth wall breaks, unless you're going to hit this later.
I don't think so.
The fourth wall breaks, I felt like, obviously he's talking to you.
Yes.
Know, and that's what the fourth wall break is. But he's talking to, the way I kind of saw it was almost like an apprentice of what they're doing.
Like, we're watching, he's like, here, let me just tell you how it's done.
Exactly.
Well, let me tell you about something creepy about this that I found in my research.
Yes.
So this is not technically based on a true story, but something similar to this did happen.
Oh, boy.
So in 1924, a long time ago, there was two kids, Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, who were 18 and 19 years old, very similar to this. They were very well-off, privileged Jewish kids in Chicago. And at their lake home, vacation lake home, they went to their next-door neighbor, their 14-year-old next-door neighbor, kidnapped him, and killed him. Did the same thing, played mind games with him, did all that. Because they were privileged kids that thought they could do whatever they want. And their reasoning was, we wanted to get away with the perfect crime. And they got caught 10 days later and went to jail for the rest of their lives. So
good.
It's things like this happen.
And a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time, but I mean...
1924.
1924, you didn't have all the same forensic stuff. But that started making me think about this. I'm like, so remember Slender Man, the girls that killed their friend and said Slender Man? The problem is we fictionalize these things, but we also... People take it to heart, and people will get demented about it. And it's just this weird thing, because they even say in the movie, you'll see it in the movie. Like, when they're talking about the fictional thing, they're like, well, if you see it in the movie, that's just... the characters being fully aware that we glorify and fictionalize tragedies. How many movies have we made that are based off of tragedies?
Oh, so many.
So many.
Yeah.
Because we're enamored as humans about tragedy.
Yeah.
And if we can kind of fluff it up a little bit and make it a little bit more watchable, that's great.
It's like, why does the opposite side of the freeway slow down when there's a car accident?
Right.
Exactly, because
Everybody
everyone's
watches.
waiting to see.
Yeah.
It's like Nightcrawler. That
Oh,
dude,
such a
that
good
movie.
great movie,
Love
but that
that
dude
movie.
is
Such a good
detached
movie.
from reality, and that's kind of how America gets when you get desensitized. Like, you just get detached from it because you're around it so much.
To be honest, even it's a total, like, it's so hard to explain. But watching it the first time, I literally couldn't even get to the first 15 minutes
I
because
know.
I was so creeped out. And then you watch it now and you're like, okay, this is creepy, but I'm like okay with watching it. You know what I mean? So that's why I wanted to ask you, like, at what point did you feel like, oh man, I feel gross?
Probably.
Was it during the egg scene? Like at the very beginning?
I wouldn't say it was like during the egg scene. I want to say it was the first instance of them being polite after I heard the dog yelp.
Okay.
I think it. So it was soon after
Sure.
you started.
Because you had
feeling-
already drawn that conclusion. You knew what happened to the dog when you heard it. Yeah.
He takes the golf club out, and then you don't see it, but you hear the dog yell.
Right.
Dogs don't do that. You know, they don't make that sound unless they're hurt.
Right.
I'm putting two and two together.
For
and
sure.
so, and then you see them, and they're still acting
Very polite.
very polite, and
nothing's
it's kind
wrong.
of like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
But that reminds me of the things you watch, like the forensic file stuff, where that dude, the Iceman,
love him.
he just killed
yeah.
people like
That
it was
guy's crazy.
like it was just normal. He
No.
talks about it like that was his job, like he was picking
it
up
was his
trash.
job.
But he talks about it like he was picking up trash, like he
Right.
was a trash man.
Well, he was
not
kinda
like
picking
he
up
was
trash.
killing
Right.
people. Like, that's insane.
But it's because, like, to him, I mean, we don't need to get
But that's what we're
into the
saying.
psychology
Those
of it.
they're
Yeah, right.
they're detached. They're detached from the
Yeah,
real
there's
like
no
But I don't
horrific
think that they
ideas
were.
of it.
I don't think they were detached from the horrific ideas.
think they
I
got
think
off
they
on it?
liked the
Probably.
horrific ideas.
Well,
I
got
don't think they
off,
were detached.
Maybe
I wouldn't say got
Maybe.
off on it, but
Because
just
they weren't
like
sexual, but
enjoyed it. Maybe
I
like
would just say
how we would play video games. They would do this.
I would say they more got off on this superiority complex.
That's true.
Of like the
They like being in
domination
charge.
complex. Yeah, where
where they had complete control. I would say it's more of a control thing.
Yeah.
Where they have
Or a
complete
challenge
control.
thing.
That too,
Yeah,
because
that
it
too,
does
yeah.
actually show they're proving they're stepping up their game every time. Because
Yeah,
now they're
and-
going to a family with 6 people there. Maybe that they're testing
I
themselves
mean,
every
I
time.
understand that they still had control over the whole thing, but they did leave for a significant amount of time, and there
It was at
weren't
least an
cameras in
hour.
the house or
Yeah.
anything. So I'm like, they did take risks in that sense. You know what I mean?
But we also knew that now they have this universal remote for their reality.
Right, of
so it's like they
course.
could have reversed anything. Like you learn that and you go, well, then there really is no risk involved in anything they did because they could have
Sure.
just changed, you reset and go back to your last save pretty much.
You know, I was going to add to a point I think you said about the desensitization of America. It's like, you know, it's already proving its point. This movie's proving
Yes.
its point because, like, I mean, how many times do you see like videos? You could go on YouTube and you watch compilations or of people getting their butts kicked, or people fighting, or people getting shot, or burned, or run
Injured.
over.
Yeah.
And everybody's filming.
Yeah.
No one's helping.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Like everybody just wants to record it. And, you know, I mean, yeah, there's the social media aspect that, you know, wanting for like likes and all that.
Sure.
But it's like nobody cares. Nobody
Yeah.
cares anymore. You know?
Yeah, we do get into
I
this
mean,
mode when
yeah, I
something
agree.
bad happens where you want to be a spectator because you don't want to be involved too.
I
Yeah.
just always wonder. I mean, I don't want to get like too deep, but I'm like, it's even like at concerts. Like one of my biggest pet peeves is people taking videos at concerts.
I
Like
know.
your
Oh, yeah.
videos look like crap. Like
Yeah.
stop taking
Just
videos
enjoy
at
the
concerts.
stupid concert.
But that's what I'm saying. Like people can't
snap a few
enjoy
pictures, but-
anything
Yeah.
without their
Yeah.
camera.
It's
They
true.
can't do anything without filming. So what's their first reaction when something happens? They
Yeah.
just film it, and I'm
Oh, for
like,
sure.
I understand maybe to some aspect you're like, okay, let's film it because what if we need a witness or like
Yeah.
whatever. Like I understand it's not so black and
I'm
white.
ready to talk about nihilism right now.
What's
We're
nihilism?
kind of going that way right now. it's kind of like the idea of like what gothness, where it's like everything is just awful and everything
everything's
sucks.
terrible.
and
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
I
pretty
mean-
much
Hey, you
what
learn
it-
something
It's a
new
lot
every
deeper
day.
than that, but we're kind of just giving you the brush over of
if,
it.
if you're like a devout nihilist person, don't be like, oh, well, that's not exactly it.
It's kind of just like the idea like nothing's all right. We're all gonna die, so you might as well just not worry about anything going the right way, pretty
Okay.
much. So two things.
love it.
One, how did those static shots? Did you like them? Because sometimes they
God.
could be a little much because it's like a mundane stuff going on.
I liked them for what they were used to achieve.
Okay.
So I liked
Yeah.
them as in like, oh yeah, I don't like this, but I like it because it is making me not like it. You know?
Exactly.
Right.
Like, you know, what was it? The back.
The backyard
The
when
backyard,
yeah, where it's just sitting there and you're
I think,
like
where I think she went into the, you could see her shadow in
Yeah.
the greenhouse, but I mean that was like 30 seconds.
it
and
did
that's a
nothing to
long
move the
time.
plot forward because they already told you the shears are in the thing, go get
Yeah.
it. They could have cut that whole scene out and not missed a beat, but the
Yeah,
fact they
yeah.
put it in there made you like
Because
Ugh.
and it's like, you know, you think about it, like a still shot, a video of a backyard of the back of a house would be like, oh, this is boring, why are we watching this?
Right.
But then like in that you're like, oh my god, are we going to see them walk by?
yeah,
Right.
you're
are they
looking
gonna
for
walk,
something.
Are they going to walk on screen at one point?
You're
you know,
constantly
while you see
looking
her
for
shadow?
something.
You're like, this is so terrible.
And one thing I never noticed about this movie is that it doesn't technically have any music. It has musical parts where they play like the classical music or they
Yeah.
play that song, but it doesn't have a score. Which I never realized. I'm like, oh, that does kind of add to the mundane idea of it. Like, this is a reality because we're not throwing in these scores that
Right.
make you feel like, oh, this is a movie.
Yeah.
It's literally you're watching someone's life. Like it's almost the idea of being a fly on a wall with static shots like that where you're watching nothing going on and there's no music.
That's why I think like we were The Apprentice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel
Yeah.
like you're viewing this for a reason almost.
I think also there were parts where I'm like leaning into the TV, like, what the heck are they saying? Like they just
Yes,
say
they're
it so
quiet
softly
sometimes.
that they
Yeah.
like kind of
Yeah.
enrapture you. And I'm like, if there was like music and stuff playing, it would seem almost like disingenuous.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the fourth wall breaks?
I don't care for them. I don't know why.
They're a little much?
People love fourth wall breaks. I can't stand them.
Well, let me ask you this. How did you like it? Because I enjoyed them because when I went into the movie, I had no clue they were going to happen. And they start off subtly. Like the first one, he just looks back at the camera and looks away. And you're like, was that meant for me? Or was he like looking at
I
someone
actually-
who was supposed to be
didn't even
back
notice that.
frame?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it gets a little bit more in your face until we get to the remote control. And it's just like, pff, that's
Yeah.
totally fourth wall breaking.
I mean, it drives home the whole idea of like violence in media.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and us as the viewer participating in the violence in media. But I mean, so I enjoyed it. as the plot device that it was.
Yeah.
You know, or the storyline device that it moved things forward, and it kind of delivered that point of like, hey, you are contributing to this. You're seeing this movie, so you're contributing to this violent.
And he's
culture.
letting you know too, because he's looking at you and saying, "I see you there."
Because the thing is without the fourth wall break, the taking the remote and fast forwarding wouldn't have made
worked.
sense.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have made no sense.
No sense
so
at all.
like I understand the point of
They
it.
had to slowly like introduce it to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I think it's good. I like the fourth wall breaks. What's weird about this movie too is that it has a subtle undertone of black comedy, because there's moments that actually make you laugh where you're like, I feel I'm a terrible person
Yeah, you
for
feel
laughing
bad
right
for
now.
laughing.
But he keeps calling Peter Tubby, and then he goes, "Don't call me Tubby." Like every time he's like, "Don't call me Tubby." And I start laughing because I'm like, this is just two stupid idiots talking to each other right
and then
now.
Beavis and Butthead.
And Tom and Jerry, they call each other.
Yeah.
So I laugh at a few moments because it's just so illogical. It's just so out there and weird, and I'm like, you know, it's interesting. I like that point. So let me ask you guys. Oh, actually, well, let's go into a quick segment here. I normally have fun facts, but this time they're
Fun
just
facts.
facts because this movie
Just
is not
regular
so
facts.
fun. So Tim Roth, who played George Sr., will not watch this movie and has not seen it because it scarred him so much psychologically
Really?
while filming it. So he has yet to see this movie as of when I saw this article, which was like 3 or 4 years ago. So maybe he's seen it now, but
I hope not.
as of like 10 years after it came out, he had not seen it. The house in this version that we watched, the 2007 remake, was used the exact same proportions when they built it for the 1997 original version. So the house was essentially built the same exact structure-wise.
Oh,
It was
wow.
furnished differently because it was, you know, American and all
Right.
that, but it was essentially the same exact layout when they built it as the house they used in Austria when they filmed.
Interesting.
The trailer, which I kind of want to check out, and maybe I'll throw it in at the end of the episode here. The trailer depicts this movie as you could almost mistake it for a comedy. Is what I was told.
that's
Like what
cool.
I read. Like people asked him in an interview, "How do you feel about this movie being depicted as almost a comedy?" And he said, "Well, I don't have a hand in that. The companies that make the trailers are the ones who do that. That's not up to me to decide."
That's awesome.
So I've never seen the trailer for this movie, so I kind of want to watch the trailer. So we'll throw that in at the end of the episode if it actually holds up and it's true or not, if I can get my hands on it. But that's pretty much all I have here. Did you guys? I just asked you. Did this wreck your Halloween?
I would have liked something else.
I think it wrecked his life.
Yeah, right.
I did not.
This movie's a little bit much.
This gave me the same feelings. I saw the remake of Straw Dogs in theaters. Mm-hmm. Did you guys ever see
I
the
don't even
original?
know
Never
Straw
seen
Dogs.
It's
Uh-uh.
well, you remember. It's got a full, very graphic scene of rape.
Oh,
yeah, no.
Yeah,
Not happening.
and it's there's nothing redeemable about the movie at the end of it, you know, because
no.
and so this movie actually gave me the same feeling of just like, okay, I get it. I'm watching a movie. It's a story. But it was just, there are parts of it that just seemed so like this has happened. This is real. You know, this isn't this, you know, the ghost-faced Scream guy, or
Right.
this isn't, you know, the Babadook or whatever,
Yeah.
you know. This is like, these are your neighbors, you know? And like, that's, I think, but it was such on a vicious scale. Like
I
that's,
feel that there's so few horror film tropes in it that it almost feels weird.
Yeah, you're right.
Because there's not a lot of tropes
You're
in
right.
this movie.
There's
It's
I
very
can't
unique.
even really think of one.
Me
Yeah.
neither, except for we knew the trope of just run, just go, just like them
Yeah.
not thinking.
Yeah.
But even then, when you stop and you step back and you think about it, you go, well, realistically, someone might actually do this because
Right.
Yeah.
you just had your son shot in front of you. You're
Yeah.
trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
You're all over the place.
Yeah,
You can't
your
think straight.
mind
You're
is
trying to
just
figure out what the
crazy.
best route is. So I get it. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
okay, that's real. As much
Yeah.
as we're sitting here on the couch going, kill him.
I just,
Run!
you know, I just still think, like, when they were gone, before she ran, she should
Yeah.
have grabbed every single knife in the kitchen and hid it throughout the couches.
Yeah.
Like, under cushions,
That's what
everywhere.
you're saying, like Home Alone. That
Like,
Home
house.
Alone
yes.
it.
Yeah, you were like, Home Alone,
Alone
that
it.
place, you
Yeah.
know? Like,
So yeah, well, how about you, Madison? Did this wreck your Halloween? You've seen this movie before, so
The thing is like I was sharing, I don't like any of the crazy monster movies. Like this is the kind of stuff that I enjoy in the sense of like it didn't have anything scary visually, but the mind aspect of it is
oh yeah,
just
it messes
so
with you.
crazy. But I was also thinking too, like because when she's running around to the neighbors, she's screaming, she's yelling, she's like trying to, get out and whatever. And we're like, where are the neighbors? Like, what the heck? Go in there, get the phone, like whatever. But I'm like, when we first start, that must have been what the neighbors before were like, because they weren't in the house.
Yeah.
They had just arrived and there was nobody else there.
Yeah.
Like, so you're just watching it over and over again. So I'm like, even when I was like, how did they leave for 2 hours, let's say, and not have anything happen to them, and like knew that they were going to be able to still win their bet? Because they have the experience. They've literally been doing this for...
And it's almost like attacking
how long,
the
but-
How many times
surprise.
have they done that?
Attacking by surprise, because you don't expect it until it's too late and you realize what's going on. And then
Yeah.
you're
yeah,
in it.
and it starts with that friendly.
Oh, yeah.
And I have some eggs.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know. I think we should petition to get Shane Dawson to see if he can diagnose them as sociopaths.
Oh, there you go. That's
my
true.
There's his next one. He did Jake Paul.
Yes.
Let's get him on these guys.
It's really good. Like, even Tim and I were saying, like, the actors did such
Oh, they did a great
good
job.
Yeah,
like,
great job.
all
Like,
of them.
Yeah, they did a great job.
But I'm also like, who is the Georgie Jr.'s whatever parents that signed him up to do this movie?
All right. So you're going to be this lovely little kid who gets his
Yeah.
head blown off with a shotgun.
Yes.
when I looked
And you're
him
gonna
up,
be
he really
terrified.
didn't do anything else much. He was in like
Well,
three.
Yeah, because he's in a
done
straight
Well, no,
jacket.
he was in 3 or 4 other movies when he was a kid, but I think he was only a kid actor. Which
He's now in an insane asylum.
an-
Yeah,
She hasn't
right.
done anything since.
when they were filming The Shining, Shelley Duvall ripped her hair out because she was so stressed. I
Yes.
can't imagine what these guys were doing with how
Well, I'm like, if the dad
psychologically
and
crazy this was.
adults won't watch the movie, which I'm always like, okay, what level of acting is too far that you take it so
Well,
deep?
the
and
reason
so
why
meta?
the reason why is because the actor who played Georgie looked almost spot on to what his son looks like.
Oh, that's pretty messed
It's
up.
kind of like
Yeah.
how you said, if anything happens to Carl, I'm
Yeah,
not
I
watching
know,
Walking
I
Dead
know.
anymore because it reminds you of your brother.
Yes, he looks
It was the
exactly
same
like
thing.
my
He goes,
brother.
this
He
kid
looks
looks
exactly
just like my
brother.
son. I cannot watch a movie where someone who looks like my son is
Interesting.
getting
You
massacred.
look like you were going to say something when I said acting goes too far.
Oh yeah, no. There's movies that I've looked into that I've never seen that.
Where they go too method.
No, just too grotesque. And,
Oh.
and
Like, have you heard of that
horrible.
movie Raw? That's supposed to be a really hard one to watch.
I
And
know.
I don't want to see
No,
it.
there's one that's worse than that.
Oh.
It's
Ooh.
No.
The one that I just heard on a podcast recently, Normies Like Us, they're a pretty cool pop culture podcast. They were talking about horror films.
Yeah.
And the one they said that scared them the most as adults is called the Poughkeepsie Tapes. Have you heard? Or Poughkeepsie Chronicles?
The Poughkeepsie tapes. I think it is.
Yeah, something like that. And it's a found
I
footage
hear-
thing of
I
a
hear it's-
serial
I hear
killer.
it's really good.
Yeah, it's
I
found
heard
footage
that's
of a
good,
serial
though.
killer
It's real
killing people.
footage?
No, it's
Oh.
fictional, but they make
That's
it.
a
I've seen
storyline.
clips of it. It looks really,
They
really
say
messed
it's
up.
really messed up. It's pretty much Blair Witch, but from the point of view of a serial killer killing his victims.
Yikes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know if I'll be watching that anytime soon.
Yeah.
It's not actually released on anything. You have to find it on the internet.
I thought
and
you meant
stuff.
like he was
Oh.
so method in the fact that he was being tortured that he couldn't watch it.
No, he's
But
just
you're
saying
as the son's point
the
of view,
idea of
like-
everything psychologically abused him, and the fact that his son
Okay.
looks a lot like
I
his son.
understand
He's
that.
just like,
Okay.
I can't bring myself to watch this movie, which is
Right.
weird because he has seen the movie technically. Both him and Naomi Watts were required to watch the 1997 version before they took the role because
Sure.
Yes.
the director was like, you need to know what you're getting into before you take this
What
role.
did they do to the 1997 people? They didn't let them watch
they all
it.
killed
Nah, yeah, right. But they're Austrian; they can handle a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They're fine. Yeah.
They're like, jawohl, das ist
Yeah.
gut.
So that's a movie, Funny Games, that's pretty intense.
Yeah,
that
very intense.
I don't want to say it holds a special place in my heart, but it was the movie that got me into indie films. It was the first movie that I heard about, and I was like, that sounds like a weird concept. I want
Yeah.
to check this out. And now I'm really into finding weird movies.
I'm just
So-
surprised that you own it.
Right? I had to. I told
Oh
you.
my
There was
God.
no way to find this movie back in 2007 or 2008 except to own it because there were no streaming platforms that had
This
it.
movie made me have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, right? I will say the first time I watched it was really hard to watch through, but now
Did you watch it by yourself?
I did the first
Oh
time
my
because
What?
I didn't know
God.
if I'd be able to handle it. So I was like, if I need to turn it off, I
God.
want to be able to turn it off
So
and not
did
have
you
to worry
watch
about
it all the way through the first time?
Yes. Also
Wow.
because I didn't
By
want to
yourself.
I didn't want to offer it to my friends to watch without knowing what we were getting into.
You're
Oh,
because I
I see.
told
You're
my
so
friends,
considerate.
I said,
know, right?
I have this movie,
Is
Funny
this the
Games.
fake politeness that
This
I
is the
expect
fake
to see
politeness.
from
Hey,
you?
do you have
I'm
any
just
eggs?
kidding.
Yeah, oh
You got
God.
any
Yeah, then, you watch it the first time. Oh, I don't want my friends to be scared. Tim,
Sure.
come on over.
Come on over, Tim.
Yeah, here,
Hey,
my
you're
wife.
fine.
Yeah,
I know
you
you're
can see
fine.
that
You're
too.
you're an EMT. You're good.
Oh,
You
jeez.
can handle it.
Yeah.
So we got some plugs I'll do here real quick.
Plugs.
We are on Instagram and Twitter Twitter at WreckMyPodcast. You can also shoot us an email, wreckmypodcast@gmail.com. We're on all major podcasting platforms as well as YouTube. Todos?
Todos.
Todos?
Todos.
All of them.
Spanish.
Yeah, Todos. Okay. You get married, you're in a Spanish family now. You got to speak the Spanish. Rate, review, and subscribe. As we said before, Patreon. Today, if you're listening to it on the day it drops, go subscribe to any tier and you will get a cool picture drawn for you, which is really awesome. We have 2 Patreon subscribers right now I want to shout out. Ryan Buds of the Trivia with Buds podcast and Cole Phen, who is a past guest on here as well. Super cool. Thank you guys. I appreciate that a lot. We have main episodes come out every Wednesday. On Monday, we have episodes of Stoked on This come out. And thank you guys for taking the time and messing your minds up a little bit watching
will
this
never
movie.
come over
I know
here.
he's never going to be on the
coming over,
He's
no.
not going to be on the podcast again.
That was terrible.
Yeah, and thank you, listeners, for watching or listening. Because without this, we'd just be a sad group of friends talking about demented movies
Yeah.
that we probably should not have ever watched.
Don't ever watch
Yeah.
it.
So if somebody comes to your door, just get rid of all your eggs.
Yeah,
Just
don't have
even
eggs.
have
Never
them.
have eggs.
Moral of the story:
Don't invite them
Do
in.
not eat
Invite
eggs.
them.
Get
Be
rid of them.
vegan.
Yeah. All right. All right. Bye.
Bye.
What is it, honey?
There's someone here.
Hello?
Sorry to disturb you. I'm staying next door.
Please, come in.
Wow, that's a really great set of clubs.
Mr. Farber. What?
You want to call someone? An ambulance? Or the police?
Why are you doing this?
Have a seat, please. I'm Paul. We're gonna make a bet now. You bet that you'll be alive tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and we bet that you'll be dead. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch the tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Why don't you just kill us?
You shouldn't forget the importance of entertainment. You shouldn't have done that, Anne.
Keep me safe all through the night, please.
That's awesome, really. Really.